Claudia went to visit her parents one morning. They lived 10 miles away, near the Thames River in England. She did not return in the evening. Her husband Chester was worried. Chester told his servant Molly that he was worried. She served him dinner. He ate alone by the light of an oil lamp. Molly stood nearby, looking worried.
Only married for 3 months, and she already wants to leave. That's not right,
Molly said. Chester shrugged his shoulders. Molly's opinion about his wife's behavior after 3 months of marriage did not matter to him. He was used to being alone and didn't mind a night or two by himself. Chester stood up and walked outside. The night was getting darker, and shadows gathered around the trees in the yard. Far away, he could hear someone playing a violin. Close by, a baby was crying. Chester's horse was ready and saddled. He still had a lot of farm work to do before bedtime. He tried not to think about Claudia, but he felt her absence like a deep ache. Before he slept that night, Chester was haunted by an image of Claudia's pale young face with its soft lips and brown eyes. The marriage had been a mistake. He could feel it when he looked into her eyes and sensed that she was starting to dislike him. But their marriage could not be undone. Chester decided he would try to make things work, and he hoped she would do the same. These sad thoughts kept Chester awake. The moonlight came into the room, making it bright. It was quiet outside, except for the sound of a violin in the distance. Claudia did not come back the next day, even though Chester asked her brother, Elton, to tell her to come back. On the 3rd day, Chester got his horse ready and went to look for her himself. Claudia's parents, the Lees, lived in a large house owned by a trader who lived in town. The house was too big for them. Upstairs, the rooms were so big and empty that they were used for parties. Everyone loved going to a dance at the Lees' house and having a plate of Madame Lee's ravioli. Madame Lee was sitting on the porch outside the house. She stood up to meet Chester. She was tall and chubby with a friendly face, but she looked tense as Chester arrived. Elton was there too, but he was not tensed. He made no effort to hide that he did not like Chester.
"Dirty pig,"
Elton whispered as Chester walked up the stairs to the porch. Elton didn't like Chester because he had refused to lend him money a long time ago. Now that Chester was married to his sister, Elton disliked him even more. Mr. Lee and his oldest son were away. They both respected Chester and spoke well of him. Chester shook hands with Madame Lee, who offered him a chair. Claudia had locked herself in her room.
You know, nothing could be done last night. Claudia just had to stay for a little dance. The boys wouldn't let their sister leave.
Madam Lee said. Chester shrugged his shoulders to show he knew nothing about last night.
Didn't Elton tell you we were going to keep Claudia?
She asked, but Elton had told him nothing.
And what about the night before? And last night? Do you have dances every night?
Asked Chester. Madam Lee laughed and told her son to go tell Claudia that her husband had arrived. Elton did not move.
You know as well as I do that it's no use to tell Claudia anything. You and Dad have been talking to her since Friday. When Claudia said she wasn't going back to Chester, she meant it.
Elton said. Chester's cheeks turned red. What Elton said was true. When Claudia went to her parents' house, she had told him that she was going there to stay. It was difficult for her to understand why she had married. Girls were just expected to get married, and she did, like Chester. Elton had asked Claudia to explain herself. He had asked her if Chester mistreated her or if he drank too much.
No.
Claudia had said,
It's just being married that I hate. I don't like being Mrs. Chester. I want to be Claudia Lee again. I don't like living with a man with all his clothes everywhere and his ugly bare feet.
At that moment, Elton felt sorry that his sister had no strong evidence to use against Chester. And now, Chester himself looked like he wanted to hit Elton. He stood up and went inside the house to his wife's room.
Claudia, get ready. It's quite late already. We don't have more time to waste,
he said quietly. Claudia was not prepared for his calm request. She felt hopeless about fighting against being married. She took her hat and gloves, walked downstairs past her brother and mother, got on her horse, and rode away. Chester followed her. It was late when they got back home. Chester ate dinner alone again. Claudia sat in her room crying. Claudia's parents had hoped that marriage would make her more responsible, a quality they felt she lacked. No one could understand why she hated being a wife so much. Chester had never yelled at her, insulted her, or failed to give her anything she wanted. His main fault seemed to be that he loved her, and Claudia was not a woman to be loved against her will. At breakfast, Claudia complained to her husband.
Why did you marry me when there were so many other girls to choose from? And it's strange that if you hate my brother so much, why would you marry his sister?
She asked.
I don't know what any of them have to do with it. I married you because I loved you. I guess I was foolish to think I could make you happy. I don't know what else to do but try to make the best of a bad situation and make peace with it,
Chester said. Now Claudia felt that her brother was the only friend she had left in the world. Her parents had turned away from her, and her friends laughed at her. But Elton had an idea to help his sister gain her freedom back. After some thought, Claudia agreed to his plan. The next morning, Chester woke up to find his wife was gone. She had packed her things and left during the night. Chester felt devastated. It wasn't new. He had been feeling it for weeks. He realized he had missed his chance of happiness. He could not think of loving any other woman and could not imagine Claudia ever caring for him. He wrote her a letter saying that he did not want her back unless she returned willingly. Claudia had escaped to the big city of Bradford. She was staying at a private hotel that Elton had chosen and paid its rent for a month. A woman named Josephine owned the hotel and took good care of Claudia. Claudia soon became friends with Mr. Winston, who was also staying at the hotel. This friendship helped her feel less lonely about missing her family. But Mr. Winston soon started to fall in love with Claudia. He knew she was unsatisfied, naive, and strong-willed. But he also suspected that she loved her husband, even though she did not realize it. He accepted this bitter realization. Claudia's last week in the city was coming to an end. She had not found a job and was too homesick to stay any longer. Also, she had not been feeling well. She told her sickness to Josephine. Josephine was very wise, and Claudia was very stupid. She calmly explained to Claudia that she was feeling sick because she was pregnant. Claudia sat very still for a long time, processing this new information. Her entire body felt a wave of happiness. Then she stood up, ready to take action. She had to tell her mother, and Chester, as she thought of him, a whole new sense of life swept over her. She couldn't wait to return to him. Claudia spent the next day traveling back to her home. When she arrived at Chester's place, he lifted her out of the horse carriage, and they hugged each other tightly. The country night was cold and quiet, except for a baby crying in the distance.
Listen, Chester, how Amanda's baby is crying. Poor thing, I wonder what's wrong with him,
Said Claudia.